Here we go.
Believe me, you've never heard a talk show like this.
I'm sleeping with Joe Carter. By the way, Joe did not touch them all.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, your voice is fantastic.
Meet Smitty.
Listen, I'm the brains here.
And Middy.
And I'm the good-looking funny one.
This is the Smitty and Middy Show.
Smitty and Middy Show back for another week here on Rogers TV. Thank you for watching and tuning in this week. Hey, Middy, we have a really exciting and different show and a different guest coming this week. So put on your learning caps.
Do we, Noah Smith? Oh, this is the third time we've done this because somebody just did press record the first time. So here we are.
Technical producer.
Yeah, it's really hard to hit the button. You go through so much schooling in radio just to forget to hit the record button.
It happens more often than you'd like to think.
It does. I know how
You've
much
been
it
here
happens.
for the last 50 whatever episodes. It happens a lot.
So yeah, Mr. Jim Shockey, if you are a hunter, if you are a outdoorsman, a naturalist, you know who Mr. Jim Shockey is. He a longtime TV show on, I believe, the Discovery Channel, but it could have been on a different channel. I think it was Discovery Channel.
It was the Discovery Channel.
I'm sure you've come across it every now and then. He is the foremost in Canada for, I would say, hunting and yeah,
Outdoor
and
activities.
the natures,
history.
And
Learning.
he has an amazing museum, which he actually joins us from. And it was my father-in-law that really put me on to Mr. Shockey here and asking him to come on to the show. So thank you, Mr. Jim Shockey, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I actually looked at some of the guests you've had on there, like Corey Connors. I mean, that's golf. And I go, what the heck am I doing on this podcast? But thank your father-in-law for getting me on.
Well, I mean, I believe hunting is a sport. I really do at its core. It takes a lot more skill than a lot of sports that you see around,
sports,
right?
Yeah.
Like we're not huge hunters. We haven't done it physically, but just watching, it takes a lot more than just going out with a gun and finding an animal.
Yeah, but to call it a sport, it may have been, back in the day they called hunters sportsmen, but it's far from that. It's a lifestyle more than anything that has certainly skills that are every bit as difficult as golf. For instance, we just talked about I golf as well. Running, even the skill of golf is very akin to archery. It's the same discipline, but it's a lifestyle, not a sport. Definitely not a sport. Sport implies competition for gold medals and winners and losers. There isn't. It's a way of life more than it could ever be considered a sport. Sorry for that, clearing that up, but it's the truth.
That's perfect. That's why we talk to you. We get to clear up things like that. That's perfect. You get the insight.
Now, how did you get into hunting? You mentioned it's a way of life. So by saying that, I would imagine that from a young age, you were introduced to hunting and something that you came to know from a very young age and into your adulthood, you knew hunting as something that was just done.
I grew up in a trailer park when I was young. We had no money and out in Saskatchewan, if my dad didn't get a moose every fall, we literally didn't eat meat all winter. We'd eat Kraft dinner. Well, it wasn't even called Kraft dinner back then. It was macaroni and cheese. So it was a very important part of my upbringing, but not in a spiritual sense. My father and I, we definitely diverged on what hunting meant to each one of us. My father, a deer running across the field was a hamburger and nothing more. There was no higher sensibilities involved. That was a good way to feed his family. If he could get that animal into the shed and butcher it up by noon on the first day of the season and be back at work by 1 p.m, that was a great hunt. But I definitely, that's not how I looked at it, even from a very young age. I was more interested in the animals. There was I'd like to say a spiritual relationship between the true hunters and my dad was a meat hunter, so I'm not saying he wasn't a hunter, but definitely he didn't have the same connection with the animals that I believe I do, and a lot of the newer generation of hunters do.
Now, it has been one of my dreams to get my license and to go out and shoot an animal for the meat and feel that experience. But I honestly don't know if I'd be able to do it. And I wonder if you remember the first time that you did shoot an animal, you did, in a sense, take a life, not to be too bleak about it. And that feeling of, catching your own food and that connection that you have with that animal then. Do you remember the first time?
Well, yes. I mean, certainly every hunter remembers their first deer. If that's what they hunted for the first time. And walking down our museum here, so there'll be the odd voice in the background, but yeah, of course. I mean, it was a seminal moment in my life, and my father was there. 3 of my uncles were there. It was a coming of age, like I say, in our family, providing for the family meat for the winter was a huge part of growing up and doing what the men of the family did. It was the way they did it back then. None of my aunts hunted. Certainly my mother never hunted, but the men did. So yeah, I remember that. Was that the most significant moment of my hunting life? Not anywhere near it, but I definitely remember it. And taking a life, it's an interesting way to describe it or look at it, because life begats death, begats life, begats death, this is a cycle, a continuum that creates the balance of this planet, and it's always there, it's undeniable, but that doesn't mean you have to be the hunter. Not everybody is. Historically, 10% of the population provided the meat for the majority of the community or tribe. And today it would be the same. I'm not saying you wouldn't be a great hunter, but probably, I might be a little better at it, just for whatever reason.
I can guarantee.
So I would provide for you, and you would in exchange, whatever, be my accountant. I don't know. Back in, and I can't see you real well. You probably look like you're in great shape and can climb mountains left and right. But
you can't.
But it does,
can't.
not everybody is cut out to be a hunter, but all of us are cut out to eat the flesh of animals, and to some degree, even if we're eating plants and we're vegans, that field of soybeans that you're going to turn into tofu was wildlife habitat. So everybody kills, whether they want to admit it or not. And arguably today there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 billion animals killed to sustain the 7.5 billion of us on this earth. Some of them are small animals, but it's just a reality. No matter whether you're, like I say, a vegan or not, or vegetarian, you're still part of this life begets death, begets life, begets death cycle. So hunters are just closer to it and understand it, and don't avoid it. They don't have a ideological issue with it. They embrace it to be part of that cycle, an active participant in nature's most ancient cycle of life. And as I say, death is hunters don't run away from that, and they're not afraid of it. And it certainly is when my daughter decided she wanted to try hunting for the first time, she was in her early 20s after university. It was a very significant moment. The tears and taking a life and knowing that you did that, it's a huge responsibility, and every hunter has to shoulder that responsibility as well. You don't do it lightly. The popular press and media would have us painted as bloodthirsty louts. It's nothing's further from the truth. Every hunter feels that heavy responsibility of taking life to sustain their own and the lives of their family. They don't gloss over it. They don't go buy cellophane wrapped meat and say, well, Pontius Pilate, I didn't kill anything. Yeah, you did. Everybody does. So that's, it's not for everybody though. And don't ever think that you're any less a human being because you can't or don't want to take the life of something and think it would be overwhelming. I mean, it is truly it's a spiritual thing that touches your ancestral soul if you're truly a hunter. And not everybody is. So thank goodness. I mean, 7.5 billion hunters out there right now in the world. It wouldn't be a very fun place to live on this planet.
Now, as we talk to you, Jim, you're walking around your museum that when we talked before, you said you opened 2 years ago, back in 2019. And there's lots of interesting artifacts behind you. And we're going to get into some of your favorites. But I wonder, do you remember your first one or when you first started collecting things from your journeys?
Well, I mean, life is a journey. And I started when I was 10 years old collecting for this museum. I knew I could have told you exactly what would be in this museum when I was 10 years old. I didn't know how I would afford to be able to pay for the things that I wanted in the museum, or where it would be. But at 10 years of age, I knew that this is what I would do with my life, and this is where I would head. I'm 63 now, so 53 years of driving in one direction with no sidetracks and no stops. You end up somewhere. So this is where I ended up, but it was not it was not something I started doing when I was in my 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s. I started at 10 years of age collecting insects for this museum. They're still here, and fish hooks. They're still here. Seashells, things that I could find in those days at the neighborhood garage sales. My journals or diaries in those days were not about who I got to dance with at the school dance, but it was about what I found that day, what treasure I found, for my museum that I knew someday I'd be standing in, which I'm doing right now.
And I know that building holds a special place in your heart too. If I do remember that's where your kids went to school, is that right? Is that the schoolhouse, and that you bought it up and refurbished it into a museum? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, both our children, Eva and Brandlin, went to school here. I'm behind me. That's the stage. I've watched many Christmas pageants on that stage, and this wall used to have bleachers on it. Now as I walk in here, and the basketball hoop's still up there on the ceiling. I don't know how you could have played a basketball game in this tiny little space, but at the time it seemed huge, and I'm sure our children thought it was huge in the day. But yeah, it was a very I spent a lot of years here. So it went from grade 1 to grade 6 public school for our children.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. It was just so interesting to me that it holds so much. Like obviously the walls hold so much history for you for all your artifacts, but on top of that, the building where your kids grew up, it just felt really special. Why that building? Why? I mean, I heard you talk about how it was broken down. You had to do a lot of work to it to even get it in that kind of shape. So why that building?
Well, we needed something big enough. I mean, this is 17,000 square feet, and that's what size I needed to house this collection that I amassed over 53 years of collecting. So we had another building that was an antique mall on the highway at Chemainus on Vancouver Island, but it was only 5,000 square feet. It wasn't big enough. And also it was right on the highway with 1 million vehicles a month passing by, which would have turned this into a roadside attraction as opposed to what it really is as an educational facility. It's called the Hand of Man Museum of Natural History, Cultural Arts, and Conservation. So there's an educational component to this museum that would have been denigrated if we put it on the highway. It would have been subservient to the, it's, like I say, roadside attraction, which this museum definitely is not.
Now, what is your favorite artifact in the museum? I know that's probably a real tough question to ask. I don't know if there's any way for you to answer over 52 years which one is your favorite, but if you had to give me a good guess, or at least an area of the museum which you find yourself in most times going, I love this part of the museum, is there one?
No, there isn't, and here's the reason why. Everything that we've created as human beings, like say for you probably did a finger painting when you're grade 1 or grade 2, who knows, and maybe you're a studied artist, maybe you're a musician. The sorry, someone's knocking, trying to get in the side door, which is like threw me off on my conversation here. But every single piece of art that we create is just as valid as a Michelangelo piece. When it comes from your heart, we can say academically and maybe justify that Michelangelo's work is really incredible and the greatest in the world, and the Sistine Chapel is very special, and it is. But what makes that any more important in a human sense than, say, these statues, that mask? That was, somebody made that to the best of their ability for pure reasons, usually ceremonial, spiritual, religious, obviously. And to say that one piece is more important or better than another, that's an academic way of judging. It's not looking at the soul of the piece itself. I mean, these pieces that I'm showing you right now, the basketry, Northwest Coast basketry, every one of these pieces is a human life, represents a human life, and the spirit of that person is still alive in that piece of art. So for me to pick one piece over any other, I wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it, because what makes that one piece better than another piece when that was a human? The human print is on that, of that particular human that made that, and every human is valid. Every life is important. So I couldn't pick a single piece. Now, there's some that I would say are dearer to my heart, nearer to my heart. I'll walk over and show you one of them that is in this Hand of Man Museum. It's right behind me right now are two geodes from Brazil. They're 9 feet tall, and between them is this painting. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That's a self-portrait that my mother painted in 1963. So that painting obviously has a deep meaning to me, much deeper than say these geodes that were mined by miners in Brazil, or this cupboard, or any of the other art pieces. But it's not more valuable. It's not more important. It just has a little bit deeper meaning to me, because it is my mother that painted it.
No, it's so interesting to hear you talk about this stuff, and we don't get in talking to athletes, and we don't get deeper into the spiritual part of life. We don't get to talk about that very often. It's so intriguing to me. It really is. I know that the museum at least was, I assume it still is, by donation to get in. And why is that so important to you?
As I said earlier, I grew up in a trailer park. My parents had no money. The conversations that I remember as a child that affected me deeply, even at that early age, were when my dad and mom were worried about whether dad would have his job or be laid off. Could we keep the trailer? Could we keep, when we eventually got a house, could we pay the mortgage on it? Those things affected me. Hard times create hard men. Is that what it is? So I know that if there was a museum like this around where I grew up close to Saskatoon, I would have lived in this museum as a youngster. I would have lived in here every single day. I would have been the curator's nightmare. I'd have been in here every day asking a million questions. But if there was a cover charge of $1 or 50 cents, I would not have been able to go to this museum. Maybe on a special occasion, on a weekend, maybe once a year. So I do not want a little boy or girl out there that would love to be in here to not be able to afford it. So, maybe I'm a bit of a Marxist in that way, from those according to their ability, and to those according to their need. I'm probably going to get crucified for quoting or paraphrasing Karl Marx, but there's something to that. And I don't believe in communism, obviously, but there is something. If you can help people, you should. It's your civil duty. So I can do that right now, and I fully intend to create an endowment and donate the whole thing, to a foundation, and hopefully a board of directors won't be able to screw it up. They'll just have to open the doors every day. And I want to keep it as a donation only. And then people use their own conscience for what they can afford and what they want to pay, and if they enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it. But that one or two, children out there that couldn't afford to come in will be able to every single day, and their parents won't have to feel shame because they can't afford the $20 cover charge that you'd have to pay going to a fancy government museum.
I think that's so important because everything behind you is history. Everything behind you is our evolution as humans. And for kids to be able to go in and to see that and to take in some of our history as humans on this earth, I think that is so important. And that was one of the things that really floored me, is that you wanted, when I heard you say that you wanted kids to be able to come in and to learn, I think that is really, really important. So, I mean, thank you for doing that. Well,
I appreciate that, but really, I mean, you don't own anything. What am I going to do? Have a giant garage sale someday? So if our children do have a giant garage sale, you want to make sure everybody listening to this show up, because there's going to be some good deals. I'll guarantee they don't know what things are worth, but you don't own it. So why not share it when you can? And to keep it locked away at home in a little room, where only you can enjoy. I don't know. That doesn't work for me. I'm not. It belongs to all of us. These are works of art from humanity for humanity, and not meant to be kept away from other people. They should be shared, and that's my philosophy. My accountant doesn't always like that idea, but they apparently you're supposed to be making money in this world, not giving it away. But I think if we, like I said, if we all do what we can, it'll be a better place. Instead of hoarding for ourselves, whether it's money, whatever, the power, you name it. I mean, we're humans. We tend to, it's mine, it's all mine. And I just don't want to, I don't know. It's not me to feel that way.
Now, we do have just a few more minutes left before we have to let you go here and we run out of time. But I wanted to ask you, and to really just let people who maybe want to get into hunting or exploring or going on their own adventures, if there's one piece of advice that you could give that young kid out there, that young boy, that young girl who is looking to try and go on their own adventures, what would that advice be?
Well, set realistic expectations and know that this isn't something you can just pick up tomorrow and be good at. It's it's something that's innate in most of us, certainly some of us, and it doesn't mean that you're one of those people, regardless of whether you want to go hunting or not. So in that case, if you go in with realistic expectations, killing an animal is not the reason you hunt. It was Ortega de Gasset, the Spanish philosopher, said, I don't hunt to kill, I kill to have hunted, right? So you don't, that's not your absolute goal, is to try and kill something to eat it. It should never be. These animals are far beyond just a piece of meat, to provide. They're, especially in today's world. So go out into the wildlands, the woods, whether it's your back 40, even public lands, wherever that may be, and enjoy all the other parts of hunting that make up hunting. The kill of an animal is like this tiny sliver of a three-dimensional ball that makes up hunting. There's the wild animals you're going to see, the birds you can listen to, the fresh air you're going to breathe, the exercise that you're going to get, the challenges that you're going to try and meet, the beautiful vistas, the camaraderie with friends and family, the humor that you're going to share. This is what hunting is all about. And so when you want to start hunting, understand that hunting isn't about killing something. It not in today's world. It's just hard to justify. I kill things for subsistence. It's just not. It's very hard to defend that. You survive on it, you eat the meat, but that's not the reason we hunt. there's all these other reasons that make up what hunting actually is. It's taking us away from this technology that, it's granted, there's a great luxury and it's important, but we need to get out in the outdoors and touch these other things that are a little bit more real. Like I said earlier, to touch your ancestral soul means that you're a hunter, and set that as your goal, not killing an animal. And that way you'll go out with realistic expectations. And when you do finally get an animal and get to take it home and butcher it up and feed your family with it, that's just icing on this wonderful cake that really is a lifestyle. As I said right from the start, not a sport. It's a way of life, the field to table way of life.
Well, that's a perfect way to bookend the interview. My father-in-law is going to kill me because we didn't even get to talk about the TV show. So, but whatever. I think he will enjoy it. We really appreciate you hopping on and making some time for us. I know it was a cram to get us in. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your night. And again, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you bet, you guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you, Jim. That was Jim Shockey joining us from his museum out in just outside of Duncan, BC. That was probably the most interesting place that someone's ever interviewed with us from. Wouldn't you agree?
It's not going to play on the radio.
It's not going to play on the radio for sure. He was actually showing us his artifacts, but it was amazing to see him walk around in his life's work.
He is a very deep, very intelligent man. I thought that was an incredibly interesting interview. I could have done that for another 45 minutes. I mean, I think it's important to have those conversations and to talk about that every now and then, right? To get a different viewpoint from somebody who respects animals in such a way, who respects artifacts in such a way, who has a different viewpoint on life. I know it's not sports. He made it very clear it's not a sport, but I think it's just an interesting conversation to have. And sometimes you have to have interesting conversations in life.
And sometimes you just need to have those conversations that are going to help you learn something new. And if sports isn't what we're talking about, if it's not a lifestyle thing, we are here to learn, and we are here to help you learn new things.
For 12 years in school, I learned nothing.
Yes.
So
and now after school, and you know what? That's what they say. I think someone really smart one time and don't quote me on this, I think they said, you learn more outside of school than you do in school.
Someone really smart. Don't quote me. Don't worry, Mr. Noah Smith. We will not be quoting you. And I am Mr. Tyler Middleton, and we are saying sayonara for another week on Rogers Television London. Hey, we're going to do it again. Same time, same place next week. We'll see you then.